why that has to happen and why it can't be that, for example, the British police can't question him instead. They're also questioning the very nature of the allegations against him, saying that they perhaps don't stand up to scrutiny. And I do think there's a level of confidence in Julian Assange's defence team. There's a really serious lineup of heavyweight human rights people who've been going into the court building there. A barrister representing him called Geoffrey Robertson, who has a very strong history of human rights cases. A veteran left-wing politician, British politician called Tony Benn, has turned up as part of the team supporting him, as well as all the celebrities we've seen over time, Jemima Khan, Bianca Jagger, these sorts of people. And so, you know, there's a lot of people behind him. He had a big grin on his face when he walked in. As he walked into the court, I asked him if he was feeling confident, and he gave me a big nod. And so I think in some ways they're actually hoping that they might get the whole thing thrown out by the end of Tuesday.
Yeah, I just had a very, very quick look through the 35 pages or so of the defence, and one of the points towards the end is that they're worried that if he is extradited to Sweden, he will then be taken over to the United States, and they're saying that, you know, there is a fair chance he might even end up in Guantanamo Bay.
Well, yeah, and in fairness, the Swedish prosecutors have denied that. They say if he goes to Sweden, it doesn't automatically follow at all, that there'd be more chance of him going to America compared to if he stayed here. Even if the charges were all dropped against him, or the accusations were dropped and he wasn't extradited, is by no means clear whether the Americans couldn't try to do the same sort of rendition from here as from Sweden. But he's always said that he wasn't anything like as bothered by these allegations in Sweden as by these people in America, some of whom have mentioned Guantanamo, and some have said he should be executed.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary reaction against him, obviously because of the WikiLeaks stuff. So he seemed confident when he went into court. What's going to happen now?
Well, it's a two-day hearing. By the end of Tuesday, the judge will have made a decision. He doesn't actually have to say at the end of Tuesday what his decision is, and he might do something called reserving judgment and have a think about it and then give an answer as to whether he should be extradited a bit later on. Even if he decides to extradite him, though, Assange can then appeal against that, and that appeal would have to be heard within 40 days. And if the appeal decides that he should still be extradited, in theoretical terms, he could take it to the British Supreme Court as well. And so it's one of these extraordinarily protracted things, and I mean, you can see these gigantic banks of cameras here from all over the world's media. Clearly the whole thing in some ways is turning into something of a circus, not least because it's very clear now what the allegations against Assange are. Some of the two women at the middle of this, at least one of them has said what Assange is alleged to have done. And quite apart from anything else, now that that's known, there's a bigger question as well as to whether he'd receive anything like a fair trial in Sweden were he ever to be charged. And so, you know, a cynic might say there's a level of farce developing around this.
Yeah, a lot of issues there. Lawrence, thanks very much indeed for putting that into context for us. Lawrence Lee in London there. Now, a hearing into the killing of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri is underway in the Netherlands. Highly sensitive charges to be brought by the prosecutor are expected to be revealed. They're thought to include terrorism and conspiracy charges. Well, Al Jazeera's Barnaby Phillips is in Leidschendam near The Hague. Barnaby, tell us what's expected to happen today.
Well, the judicial process of this tribunal has finally started, Shuli, if you like. That's the big significance. What we're hearing today is a pre-trial process whereby judges are discussing some of the terms which are probably in the indictment. As you were saying, terrorism, conspiracy, the definition of premeditated murder. And through those discussions, if you like, we're getting tantalising clues as to what may be in the indictment, certainly not as to who is being indicted. That, of course, is a completely different issue. But let me bring in my guest at this point. His name is Mikhail Vladimirov. He's an expert on international law. Mikhail, in simple layman's terms, because we're not all as knowledgeable as you about legal matters, why is today important here?
Well, it's very important to test what the limits are of the law applicable to the future trials. Either it is Lebanese law and nothing more than that, or it is Lebanese law amended by international law or to be interpreted by international law. That is the main feature to be debated today.
And we'll have this debate today. Then, if I understand correctly, the judges on the appeals chamber will go away and consider those issues for what, possibly for weeks even?
I'm not sure whether that will take weeks, but so far I've no reason to believe that they will proceed rather rapidly, because they have prepared the case also very quickly. It's clear that they will provide the trial chamber, later trial chamber, if the indictment will be confirmed, guidance how to apply the law. That's essentially what they do. They're not giving the definite answers, because what they will decide as guidance will be subject to a challenge, either for the prosecutor or the defendant, if an indictment will be confirmed.
Okay, that's all very technical. If I were to ask you when this trial will begin, what would be your hunch?
I have no clue whatsoever.
Oh, dear me. Well, certainly people in Lebanon will be watching this very closely, won't they?
Well, it totally depends on the answers they will give, and that may be the clue whether the pretrial judge will confirm the indictment. If the indictment will be confirmed, it takes another 2 months or perhaps a little bit more before a trial will start.
Let me ask you a broader question. Obviously, the question of how this trial proceeds, determining who killed Rafiq Hariri back in 2005, answering those questions are going to shake Lebanon's stability, is going to shake Lebanon's stability to the very core. Can these judges here really operate in a bubble away from the political pressures around this trial, or are they susceptible to the very many political currents swirling around the trial even before it's begun?
Well, these are experienced judges, more precisely the president is, because they have functioned before in another international setting, the Yugoslavia Tribunal. So they are not living in an ivory tower, but they have a receptive ear to what's going around in Lebanon, so they understand what's going on. But on the other hand, these are professional judges, independent and impartial, so I do believe that they are able to find their way without any interference of local situations.
Mikhail Vladimirov, thank you very much. Our guest here giving us some legal context, Shuli, to the beginning of what is a very long and a very complicated but ultimately crucial process for the future of Lebanon.
Let's go back to our top story now, the continuing protests in Egypt. And these are live pictures coming out of Tahrir Square, Liberation Square in Cairo, where, as you can see, prayers are taking place. Now our correspondent, Hoda Hamid, is watching what's going on. Hoda, today is significant, as I understand it, because funeral prayers are taking place for a journalist who was killed in these protests. Is that right?
Yes, that is right, but it is a symbolic funeral. Now, this journalist was killed on the 28th of January. According to his wife, he was standing on the balcony of his house taking some pictures with a mobile phone when he got hit by a sniper. Today, the journalist syndicate decided to honor him, so they're going to have a procession from the journalist syndicate, which is about 10 minutes away from here, around the square, and then they will exit the square from the other side. Now, we don't know exactly when that will happen, but we're expecting it to happen not quite soon now, because we think it will happen just after the noon prayer, which is happening at the moment. Now, talking about the prayer, I just have to tell you that today, for the first time, the call to prayer was made from a mosque here. There's a mosque that is just on the side of the square, and it was for the past 2 weeks there were no call to prayer from there. Today it was the first time, so another sign of life returning slowly to normalcy in Egypt.
And just on the subject of journalists and the problems they've had covering what's going on in Egypt. I mean, one journalist killed, many more detained and attacked. Is that level of targeting and repression continuing? Have you experienced it?
I have not experienced it over the last 3 days, but Ayman Mohiddin, our correspondent, has experienced it. Yesterday, he got detained for several hours by the military. He has now been released, Other journalists have been shortly detained and questioned. I think today is going to be another day where we find out exactly what's happening. But the level of violence that journalists had experienced last week, I think that has gone down considerably.
And you were saying that outside the square, life starting to go back to normal. Is this the government's way of trying to get people out of the square?
It's certainly a way for the government to try to appeal to the hearts and minds of the wider Cairo, who has not come to